I am Serena. I'm 34 years old, and my own father struck me across the face in front of our entire family because he believed a lie my brother's wife told him. A lie designed to ruin my life and steal my future. Before I tell you how I uncovered their entire rotten scheme and reclaimed my dignity and name, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It was my dad's 60th birthday, one of those crisp, golden October afternoons in New England that looked like something straight out of a movie. The scent of chimney smoke drifted on the wind, mingling with the earthy sweetness of fallen leaves. Inside the house, everything glowed with warmth. Laughter, my mom's famous pot roast, a dish she only made for truly special occasions. The big bay windows flooded the room with sunlight, casting gold over a scene that seemed perfect. Aunts, uncles, cousins, glasses clinking, and cheerful conversation humming in the background. We looked like the model American family. Happy, successful, close. I was thriving as a financial advisor in the city. My brother, Mark, supposedly managing a division at our father's company. Everything appeared right on the surface. But perfection is often just a mask, and ours was hiding something festering. The buzz of conversation softened as my sister-in-law, Sarah, stood up from her chair, holding her wine glass. She wore a strange smile, tight, trembling, stretched too wide. Her eyes were wild, too bright. "I'd like to make a toast," she said, a bit too loud. "To family, the most important thing in the world, and to new beginnings." Then she turned to look directly at me, eyes gleaming with something awful and triumphant. "There's something you all need to know." The silence was instant and suffocating. Her voice wavered dramatically as she looked at my father, her knuckles pale around her glass. "Serena stole from the company." The words exploded into the room like a grenade. The air went cold. I felt all the blood drain from my face. My first thought was that she was joking. A sick, twisted joke only Sarah could concoct. I opened my mouth to protest, to laugh it off, to say, "Sarah, what are you talking about?" But I made the mistake of looking at my father. He wasn't confused. He wasn't even questioning it. His face was carved into an expression of sheer, icy fury. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't wait for explanation. He believed her. He stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor and stepped toward me. When his hand struck my face, the crack was sharp and horrifying. The room gasped. The sting burned hot, then numb. I stumbled, crashing against the buffet table. Plates rattled. My vision swam. Before I could catch my breath, Mark shoved me. His face twisted in a grotesque show of rage that felt fake, performed. "You thief!" he yelled. "You disgusting liar!" I fell, hard. My elbow hit the floor, my heart pounding in my ears. Dazed, I searched the room, looking for my mother, my last hope. She was standing by the fireplace, her hand over her mouth in horror. But when our eyes met, there was no warmth in hers, only cold, shaking disappointment. Like I was something dirty, something vile crawling across her floor. In the periphery, I saw phones, cell phones glowing blue, cousins recording. No one stopped it. No one said a word for me. In that moment, I ceased to exist. Not a daughter, not a sister, not family, just a name they'd already erased. I stood up, shaky, silent. What could I say? Their judgment had already been passed. I climbed the stairs to my old bedroom, shut the door, and locked it. Downstairs, shouting. Faint, muffled, irrelevant. I didn't stay long, but before I left the house for good, I went into my parents' bathroom, that grand, overly decorated room they were so proud of. I took a bar of soap, and on the mirror, I wrote 4 words, and you didn't even ask. Betrayal isn't just the moment the knife goes in, it's every twist afterward, every silence, every stranger's stare. For me, the twisting began the next morning. You have to understand how my family worked to grasp the efficiency of what came next. There was an unspoken rule. Mark was the golden child. I was the responsible one. Mark was charming, careless, dangerous. I was stable, reliable, and always expected to clean up his messes. I remember when he turned 16. He got a brand new sports car. I got a savings bond and a lecture about budgeting. He failed classes, got his grades reviewed. I struggled through calculus and was told to study harder. But the worst was when I was 17. Mark was 20. He siphoned tens of thousands of dollars from our father's company into some offshore, can't-miss investment. It was a scam, of course. The money vanished. I only found out because I caught Dad in his study, head in hands, crushed. He was going to confront Mark. It would have been catastrophic. I told him, give me 24 hours. I locked myself in that room, poured through financials, coded losses, created legitimate loopholes, made the bleeding disappear. Grandpa was the only one who saw the truth. A few days later, he pulled me aside. That was the work of a woman, he said, his voice firm. Your brother's a child, but you understand what a house is worth. When he passed away 2 years later, his will said it all. 60% of his estate and trust to be transferred to me on my 35th birthday. The rest, split between Mark and our parents. They were livid, furious that the favored child had been passed over. But Grandpa hadn't been cruel. He was protecting his life's work. And now, Mark's long, calculated race to destroy me had reached the finish line. And he'd chosen Sarah's lie as his final weapon. My reputation, the foundation of my career as a financial advisor, was being demolished, not by competitors, not by scandal, but by my own father's hands. The first blow came at 8:05 a.m. Monday. Walter, my mentor and managing partner at the firm, a man I respected deeply, called. Serena, he said, and there was a terrible, weighted tone in his voice I had never heard before. I just got off the phone with your father. The air froze in my lungs. Walter, please, it's a lie. It's a disgusting, calculated lie. You have to believe me. He let out a long, exhausted breath. I've known you for years, Serena. I've watched your work. I don't believe you're capable of something like this. But your father, he's not just a pissed-off parent. He sits on the board of our biggest institutional client, Northgate Pension Fund. And he made it clear. If you're still employed by this firm by tomorrow, they'll pull their 9-figure account. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. That's it? I whispered. He just wins on a lie? This isn't about winning, Serena. It's about survival. The board held an emergency meeting. You're being placed on indefinite administrative leave, effective immediately. I'm sorry, my hands are tied. Then the line went dead. I sat in my apartment, sleek, stylish, a monument to my hard-won independence, and watched everything crumble around me. The sterile white walls felt like a tomb. The second blow landed that afternoon. My landlord, a kind old history teacher who always asked about Tank and my week, knocked on my door. He didn't smile. His voice was clipped, cold. Miss Harrison, I received a call this morning from your father. Apparently he's a senior partner in the firm that owns this building. He explained the situation. There was venom in his pause. Due to the moral turpitude clause in your lease, we'll be terminating your contract. You have 30 days to vacate. They weren't just kicking me out. They were erasing me. That week was hell, a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I called a colleague, someone I thought was a friend. He listened for 20 seconds, then said, Serena, I don't know what's going on, but if you're smart, you'll lay low. I can't be seen talking to you. He hung up. Neighbors wouldn't meet my eyes. The barista at the corner cafe passed my coffee silently, the warmth in her smile gone. The whisper campaign was faster than light, and my father, with his connections, his fury, was stoking every ember. The only hand that reached for me was Elena's, my best friend since we were 5 years old, the one who'd always known my heart before the suits and salary. Her name lit up my phone, and I answered with shaking hands. Serena, she sobbed before I could speak. Oh my God, are you okay? I don't believe a word of it, not one filthy word. I whispered, barely breathing. I think my family is trying to destroy me. Her voice turned sharp, fierce. What do we do? I'll go there. I'll scream at them. I'll talk to your cousins. No, my voice cut through, sudden and clear. Don't. Because I understood something then, something brutal. You can't fight a lie when the liars are your own flesh and blood. They build a wall, and the truth can't climb it. I knew in my bones I couldn't stay. Every day would be a fresh torment. Every hour, a humiliation. I sold my car for a third of its value. Sold my grandfather's watch, the one I'd clung to like an anchor. Cleared out my apartment, packed a suitcase and a backpack. Then I withdrew every cent I had from the bank, and I went to the airport. I need a one-way ticket, I told the agent. To where? Anywhere, I said. What's the next flight heading west? Portland, leaves in 45 minutes. I'll take it, I replied, and handed over cash. I used the name Serena Harrison for the last time. As I walked toward the gate, I dropped my phone, full of photos, contacts, memories, into a trash bin. I didn't even flinch when I heard it crack at the bottom. That woman was gone, dead. She died in her parents' living room, betrayed by the people who were supposed to love her. As the plane rose into the sky, I stared down at the city where I'd built my life and watched it fade beneath the clouds. I felt nothing. Not sadness, not rage, just a hollow, terrifying numbness. I was in exile, a ghost, flying toward a future I couldn't imagine. Portland was just a waypoint, a place to breathe before vanishing for real. I took a bus, old, creaking, smelling of coffee and cheap disinfectant, toward the coast. No plan, just an instinct. I needed small, anonymous, a place even my father's reach couldn't touch. On a peeling map at the station, I found a name that felt like a whisper, Port Blossom. It didn't sound real. It sounded perfect. A fishing town, all gray waves and rusted boats and moody skies, where the air was salt and diesel and damp pine, where no one wore suits or cared about Wall Street. I found a motel, the Fisherman's Rest, with flickering neon and faulty plumbing. And I gave myself a new name. Miles. Just Miles. Because I had so many left to go. My resume was useless here. It was a liability, so I walked to the docks. I asked for work. The harbor master, Gus, weathered and craggy, laughed out loud. "Look at you," he said, eyes scanning my soft hands, clean coat. "You're a tourist who got lost. What makes you think you can do this kind of work?" "I'm a fast learner," I said. "I'm not afraid of pain." He squinted at me for a long moment, then pointed to a mountain of tangled nets, chains, and gear. "Sort that. Clean it, mend it, be here at 5 a.m. tomorrow. Bet you don't last the day." I lasted. I bled. My muscles screamed. But I didn't stop. I had to become someone else. I had to survive. At the end of a brutal 10-hour day, an old man named Ben, tough as jerky, wandered over. "You got soft hands," he said. "They'll harden." He watched me fumble with a net. "Maybe they will," he muttered. "Show up tomorrow." I did. And I became someone new. I showed up every morning at 5, long before the sun even considered rising. I hauled crates of ice until my shoulders throbbed. I scrubbed fish guts off boat decks. I untangled ropes, mended nets, learned knots I couldn't have named a week earlier. The cold wind whipped my face raw, and the salt water stung every open blister on my palms. But I didn't complain. I didn't quit. The other dock workers, rough, foul-mouthed, suspicious, slowly stopped calling me City Girl and started calling me Miles. Ben, who had once looked at me like I was a joke, became a reluctant teacher. He showed me how to read weather in the sky, how to load a boat without capsizing it, how to tie a bowline that wouldn't slip under pressure. At night, alone in my cramped motel room, the memories would crash down like waves. My father's hands slamming into my face, my mother's disgust, Mark's sneer. I couldn't escape them. Some nights I punched the walls. Other nights I cried until my body ached. About 6 months into this exile, I hit bottom. A string of brutal winter storms kept the fleet grounded. No boats meant no work. I was down to my last $20. The motel owner had stopped pretending to be friendly. I was days from homelessness. I sat in the corner booth of the only diner in Port Blossom, nursing a cup of black coffee I couldn't really afford. 2 local businessmen sat nearby, arguing over a failed real estate deal. Something about loan terms, cash flow issues, and collateral. My old brain, the Serena brain I'd tried so hard to kill, kicked in. I saw the problem. The structure was flawed. Their approach was all wrong. I could fix it. Clean, elegant, legal. I even saw how I could take a small, untraceable fee through a blind trust. Nothing illegal, just shady enough. I sat with it, wrestling. The money could have saved me. I could have been out of this town, out of these docks in a week. But then I looked at my hands. They were cracked, calloused, strong. They weren't Serena's hands anymore. They were Miles's. I left the coffee half finished, left a 5 on the counter, and walked out into the cold rain, broke and starving, but clean. It felt like the most important choice of my life. A quiet victory. The real turning point came from the last place I expected, the Port Blossom Library. It was run by Mrs. Patel, kind, sharp-eyed, and quietly brilliant. She had escaped the corporate grind in Seattle years ago, and now ran the town library and a tiny secondhand bookstore next door, both underfunded and struggling. One rainy afternoon, I went in just to warm up. She was hunched over piles of receipts in the back room, her face twisted with worry. "I'm losing the shop," she confessed when I asked. I didn't tell her who I used to be. I just said, "Let me take a look." For 3 days, I sat in the back of that bookstore, sorting her finances. The issue wasn't sales, it was cash flow and inventory mismanagement. I built her a simple spreadsheet, reorganized her vendor payments, and highlighted which products made her money and which bled it. I didn't ask for payment. I did it as a neighbor. A month later, she turned a profit, a modest $100, but it was black ink. Mrs. Patel was overjoyed, and she started talking. She told the diner owner, the hardware store lady. The word spread. Soon, the dock workers weren't just calling me Miles, they were asking me for advice. So I rented a tiny office above the hardware store, painted a simple sign, Miles Financial Solutions. I charged little. I didn't wear suits. I wasn't chasing wealth. I was building trust, one spreadsheet at a time. And that's how I met Clara. She was a force of nature. Born and raised in Port Blossom, daughter of a fisherman. She ran the local fish market with a no-nonsense attitude, tough hands, and eyes that missed nothing. She came to me for advice. Her father was considering buying a new boat. It was a huge investment. We sat in her chilly back office, surrounded by the smell of ocean and salt. She was smart, grounded. She didn't care about credentials. She cared about truth. I crunched the numbers and told her, don't do it. It would sink their business. Instead, I showed them a smaller, smarter investment path. She listened. She trusted me. And slowly, quietly, our conversation shifted. We started taking long walks by the beach, sipping coffee under the pier, sharing stories neither of us had ever told anyone else. It wasn't a spark or a rush. It was steady. It was real. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was healing. For 3 years, the past was a locked room. I didn't open it. I didn't want to. Serena Harrison was a ghost I left behind. Until one day, in the middle of a brutal storm, that ghost knocked on my door. Literally. Clara and I were curled up on the couch, tea in hand, listening to the wind shriek outside. Then, a desperate, frantic pounding at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Elena, soaked, shaking, pale. My God, she whispered, it really is you. I stood frozen, my hand still on the knob. She didn't belong here. She belonged to the life I buried. Clara, ever composed, wrapped her in a blanket and handed her hot tea before I could speak. Elena, I finally said, how did you find me? A private investigator. Took him months. He found a tax record. Miles Financial Solutions. I didn't know if it was really you, but I had to come. She paused. I think something terrible is happening back home. She told me about Mark, the Porsche, the trips, the story he spun about performance bonuses, about how my dad's company was doing great. But Elena, sharp, observant, still working as a paralegal, had been reading the public filings. The company wasn't thriving. It was barely breathing. My mom's scared, she said. She won't say it, but I can hear it in her voice. The last time I asked about the finances, she said Mark is taking care of everything now. Then she hung up on me. Then came the words that pierced through every wall I had built. I think Mark is stealing from them, Serena. I think he's been stealing from them for years. Elena's words echoed in the silence of my small apartment, barely audible over the storm outside. I think he's draining their accounts, Gemein, she said, her voice trembling. I think that whole thing, Sarah's lie, the theft accusation, it was never just about getting you out of the picture. It was about getting control. Your inheritance was just the first step. They needed you gone, so Mark could take everything. The fire I thought had long since turned to ash stirred again inside me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my parents. Even after everything they had done, being taken advantage of in their old age by the son they had trusted blindly, by the one they had chosen over me. That night, after Elena fell asleep curled up on my couch, I sat at my desk with my laptop and a mug of black coffee. I opened spreadsheets. I logged into public databases. I pulled up corporate filings, asset records, tax returns. The instincts I'd buried for 3 years roared back to life. I wasn't Miles anymore. I was Serena Harrison, the woman who could follow a money trail in her sleep. And I was going hunting. I found it quickly. A shell company, Westwind Holdings LLC, registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. It had a single listed director, a name I didn't recognize, but the filing fee had been paid using a credit card linked to Mark's old billing address in New Jersey. Sloppy. Then came the property records. One by one, I saw it. My parents' investment properties being sold off to Westwind Holdings for pennies on the dollar. And the money? It wasn't going into trust funds or retirement accounts. It was being funneled into private accounts, filtered through overlapping holding companies. I traced one of them to a wire transfer for a luxury car, a Porsche Cayenne, bought 2 days after one of the biggest transfers. Elena was right. Mark was stealing from them. I had the what, but I didn't have the why that linked it to the lie Sarah told years ago. The accusation that I had stolen money from the family business. Without that connection, it was just embezzlement, not a conspiracy. I needed a link, a motive, something that proved the lie wasn't random, that it had been premeditated and orchestrated. And for that, I would have to go back. Back to the house where everything fell apart. Elena flew home the next morning, promising to watch the family's movements and let me know the best time to act. This isn't just about justice, she told me at the airport. It's about truth. Take back your story. A week later, she called. Sunday night dinner, everyone's there. Mark, Sarah, your mother, even your cousin Vanessa. It's now or never, Serena. Do it. The next morning I drove. Every mile east was a step back into my own grave. The forests thinned, the coastline faded. The streets grew tighter, familiar in the worst ways. I pulled up to the house I once called home, the one where my world had burned down in silence. Everything looked the same. The oak tree I'd fallen from as a kid, the dip in the third step leading to the porch. But to me, it was foreign ground. I didn't knock. I used the old house key I never threw away. The one I'd forgotten still sat on my chain, and let myself in. They were in the living room, the same room where they had destroyed me. My father looked thinner, smaller, slumped in his leather chair. His eyes were cloudy, confused. My mother fluttered around him, nervously arranging throw pillows that didn't need adjusting. Mark and Sarah sat on the sofa like royalty, smug, comfortable, in control. Vanessa was near the window, hunched, distant, her eyes far away. The moment I stepped inside, silence swallowed the room. My mother gasped, Sarah went ghost white, my father blinked, unsure, and Mark grinned like a snake. Well, well, he sneered. Look who clawed her way out of whatever gutter she's been hiding in. I didn't answer. I walked to the coffee table and placed a manila folder on it. Inside was the documentation. Wire transfers, company filings, tax forms, shell corporations, everything I'd found. I'm not here to rehash the past, I said calmly. I'm here to talk about the future, about Mom and Dad's future. I paused, letting that settle, then, let's talk about Westwind Holdings. The color drained from Mark's face. Sarah turned to him, panicked. I don't know what you're talking about, he said loudly. You come in here with made-up paperwork and think you can... Is it made up? I slid a statement across the table. That's a transfer from Dad's business account to Westwind Holdings, October 14th. And this, I slid another paper beside it, is the down payment for your Porsche, dated October 15th. Silence. Mom, I said, my voice softening, remember those papers Mark had you and Dad sign last month? The ones for the tax restructure? Do you know what they were really for? Her eyes flicked to Mark, uncertain. He snapped. This is ridiculous. I've been protecting the family assets, something Serena clearly knows nothing about. I smiled, cold, measured. Protecting them? By funneling money into a shell company and spending it on luxury cars and vacations? And then, like a gift from fate, the doorbell rang. My mother leapt to her feet, grateful for the interruption. She opened the door. Elena walked in. And beside her, clutching a laptop and looking absolutely petrified, was Vanessa. Mark's bravado faltered. Vanessa walked to the coffee table and opened the laptop. There's something you need to see, she said, her voice trembling. On the screen was an email from Mark to Sarah. Dated October 20th, one day before the infamous birthday dinner. Subject, the Serena problem. The body of the email was horrifying in its simplicity. Tomorrow's the day. We do it now, before Dad starts asking real questions about the company's numbers. You know what you have to say. Make it dramatic. Make it hurt. We need her out of the will and out of the picture. This is the only way we get control. Don't screw it up. Gasps. The room cracked. Sarah broke first. She let out a guttural wail and backed away from Mark as though he'd grown fangs. You told me it was the only way, she shrieked. You said she had stolen from us. I was never pregnant. It was all a lie. You made me lie. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing. My father, for one moment, looked right at me. His gaze cleared. He understood. The fog lifted just long enough for him to see the truth. And then, another voice, low and firm, cut through the chaos. I believe I've heard enough. It was Mr. Winters. our family attorney for 30 years, the man who drafted my grandfather's will. Elena had called him. She'd asked him to be nearby, just in case. He stepped into the room like a judge entering court. He looked directly at Mark. Effective immediately, your signing authority is revoked. You are frozen out of all accounts. I'll be petitioning for an emergency conservatorship over your parents' estate first thing tomorrow. Mark sputtered. You can't do that. This is a family matter. This is elder abuse, Mr. Winters said coldly, and a felony. Sarah, ever the survivor, jumped ship. I'll testify, she said quickly. He made me do it. I was scared. Mark turned to her, betrayed. But it was too late. The empire of lies had fallen. Mark looked like a man drowning, reaching for lifelines that no longer existed. His face had gone slack, all the color gone. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. You, he finally whispered, looking at me with venom, his voice hoarse and broken. You did this. I didn't flinch, I didn't gloat, I didn't even raise my voice. No, Mark, I said quietly, wearily. You did this. I just finally held up the mirror. Mr. Winters took over the room like a surgeon after a car crash. With calm, measured precision, he began moving people, directing statements. He sat my sobbing mother down in the corner chair and spoke to her in low, even tones. He guided my confused father back into a safe, calm space, away from the swirl of chaos. Vanessa and Elena sat at the dining room table, writing down everything, what they had found, what they had heard, what they had witnessed. Every confession, every transaction, every dirty secret. It was all being documented in real time. I stepped outside. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. The porch was cool and quiet, bathed in the colors of the setting sun. Red and orange streaks lit up the October sky, a fitting backdrop to the most explosive evening of my life. A few minutes later, my mother came outside. Her face was pale and puffy, her eyes red and swollen. She looked years older than she had just hours ago. Serena, she whispered, her voice barely held together. I'm so sorry. I didn't speak. I just looked out over the yard. She took a shaky breath. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I thought I was protecting the family. I thought I was doing the right thing. I turned to her slowly, my face unreadable. Are you sorry for believing the lie? I asked. Or are you just sorry because you finally got caught? Her knees buckled slightly, as if I had struck her. She looked away. No, she whispered. I'm sorry for everything. For not asking. For not questioning. For watching your father hit you and standing there frozen. For the look in my eyes. I remember it now. I can't believe I looked at you that way. You were my daughter. She finally turned to face me, raw grief etched into every line on her face. But we can fix this, she said. We can be a family again. You can come home. We need you, Serena. He needs you. I need you. I stared at her, and for once I felt no rage, no fire, just an ocean of sadness. I'll make sure you're taken care of, I said quietly. You and Dad. I'll work with Mr. Winters to establish a trust. You'll be safe. Mark will never touch your finances again. She started to speak, to reach for me, but I stopped her with a single word. But, I shook my head. I can't come home, Mom. Why? She asked, her voice cracking like glass. Why not? I looked down at the porch boards beneath my feet, the grain of the wood, the faint creak in the third plank. I knew this house, every inch of it, but it wasn't mine anymore. You didn't just believe a lie, I said. You wanted to, because it was easier than facing the truth about Mark. You watched Dad hit me, and you did nothing. Tears streamed down her face, silent and unrelenting. I can forgive being fooled, I said. Maybe even someday forgive weakness. But I can't forget that moment. I can't unsee what you did, what you didn't do. I looked up at the big oak tree in the front yard, its leaves blazing with autumn fire. That house, I said more to myself than to her, isn't my home anymore. I walked down the steps. She didn't follow. She just stood there crying. And I didn't look back, because there was nothing left there for me. Coming back to Port Blossom was like surfacing from deep underwater, lungs burning, heart pounding, and finally taking a full breath. The smell of salt and pine, the distant echo of gulls, the gray shimmer of the sea, it was like balm on my soul. When I pulled into the driveway of my apartment, Clara was sitting on the steps with a thermos of coffee in her hands. She stood as I got out, no questions, no speeches, just arms wide open. She hugged me like she would never let me go. In that embrace, I felt the last weight of my old life finally fall away. The weeks that followed were quiet, focused, restorative. Mr. Winters handled the legal fallout with expert precision. The judge granted an emergency conservatorship over my parents' estate within a week. The financial web Mark had spun was unraveled piece by piece, all of it documented, all of it frozen. Mark was facing real consequences now, criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and more. Sarah filed for divorce and cooperated fully. She walked away with a chunk of what was left of Mark's assets, the last predictable betrayal in a long string of them. My parents were moved to a beautiful assisted living facility near Elena, specializing in memory care. My father needed help I couldn't give, and I wasn't going to pretend I could be his daughter again. I spoke to my mother once a week. The calls were short, quiet, emotional. Her apologies never stopped. My answers were always polite, but never warm. I would ensure she and my father were cared for. But I was never going back. Meanwhile, my life, the one I'd built with my own two hands, began to bloom again. Miles Financial Solutions thrived. The townspeople I'd once helped with spreadsheets and overdue bills became my clients, my friends, my family. Clara and I worked side by side to organize a co-op for the local fishermen. Bulk supplies, better prices, more leverage with distributors. We were a team, solid, steady, real. And then, one spring morning, about 6 months after it all went down, a black German sedan rolled into Port Blossom. The kind of car that didn't belong in this town. Out stepped Walter, my old boss. He was still every bit the executive. Crisp suit, polished shoes, sharp eyes. But he smiled when he saw me. "Miles," he said, shaking my hand. "You look good, Serena. Sea air suits you." We sat on the porch and drank coffee out of mismatched thrift store mugs. He told me he was leaving the firm. He was tired, disillusioned, and he was starting his own. A small, focused investment group. No red tape, no boards, just smart people doing good work. "I want you to be my partner," he said. "My lead. We'll build it together from the ground up. Name your price." 3 years ago, that would have been my dream. Corner office, 7-figure salary, title, recognition. But now, I looked across the street. Mrs. Patel's bookstore had a sign in the window, now hiring. Ben was on the docks fixing a net with his usual scowl. Clara's truck was parked in front of the fish market. My home. I turned back to Walter and smiled, a deep, peaceful, grounded smile. "Thank you," I said. "That offer means more than I can explain, but my life is here now." He nodded slowly, and then to my surprise he smiled too. "I was afraid you'd say that," he said. "But good for you, Serena. Good for you." It wasn't just a compliment. It was closure. The final nail in the coffin of the life I had once thought I couldn't live without. Walter's visit was the closing of a chapter I hadn't realized was still open. When he drove away down the narrow, pine-shrouded road out of Port Blossom, I stood for a long time on the porch, feeling something I hadn't in years. Peace. True, undiluted peace. Not triumph, not vindication. Just the quiet certainty that I had chosen the right life, the better one, and no one could take it from me. There was one thread left to tie up. A few weeks later, a much more modest sedan rolled into town. This one I recognized. Vanessa called me from the diner. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. "Can we talk?" she asked. We sat in a back booth, the same booth where I once stared down a choice between money and morality, the same place where I chose to walk away from the old version of myself. Vanessa looked older. Her guilt had aged her, carved lines into her once youthful face. But her eyes were steady now. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness," she said, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug. "I know I don't deserve that. I needed to say I'm sorry, in person, to your face, for recording that night, for standing there, for doing nothing." I nodded, listening, silent. "I was scared," she continued. "Scared of Mark, scared of your mom, scared of what it would mean if I said something, and I hated myself for it, every day." She looked up at me. "So why did you finally come forward?" I asked gently. "What changed?" She paused, then said something I didn't expect. "Because it was the right thing to do, and because I was tired of being afraid." She glanced out the window. "I saw what Mark was doing to them, your parents, watching him take control, manipulate them, twist everything while everyone around him clapped. It was like watching a spider wrap its prey. I started looking through his papers. One day I found that email, and I knew I had to do something." I looked at her for a long time. This was the same woman who'd once held her phone up and filmed my humiliation. But she had found the courage to correct it. In the end, she had chosen integrity over silence. "I know," I said quietly, "and I appreciate it. You did the right thing." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I can't erase what happened," I added, "but I can move forward, and maybe we can build something new, different, honest." Vanessa smiled through her tears, small and hopeful. We both knew we'd never be the family we were before, but maybe, just maybe, we could become something better. In the end, after all the legal battles and frozen accounts and shattered lies, I never saw a cent of my grandfather's inheritance, and that was by choice. When Mr. Winters completed the forensic accounting and finalized control of the estate, I asked him to do something radical. I told him to take the entire 60% share left to me in the will, the controlling portion, and place it in a legally binding, independently managed trust. Its sole purpose, to fund my parents' long-term care, their medical bills, their housing, their safety, nothing for me. He stared at me like I'd grown another head. "Serena, are you sure?" he asked. "This was your legacy." I smiled, calm, unshakable. "No, Mr. Winters," I said. "That was his legacy, his money, his work, and if I keep it, it only poisons me. The money was the weapon used to destroy me. I want nothing from it." He didn't argue. He just nodded and made it happen. Mark's remaining 40% share, his and our parents' combined portion, was more than enough to cover legal fees, pay back stolen funds, and dissolve what was left of his fantasy. My parents were safe, and I was free, because my real wealth wasn't in any trust. My wealth was in Port Blossom. It was in the people who had welcomed me, a stranger, with rough hands and quiet hearts. It was in the small consulting office above the hardware store. It was in the shared smiles, the dockside handshakes, the unspoken loyalty of a tight-knit community that had no time for flash, but endless time for truth. It was in Clara. It was in our long walks on the beach, our shared vision of a life not built for appearances, but for meaning. A year after the confrontation, Clara and I stood on a bluff overlooking the wild Pacific, wind whipping our hair and mist curling around our boots. We'd just closed on the land. It wasn't much, a little wind-swept plot of earth just outside town where the cliffs met the sea. But it was ours. We were going to build a home there, not a mansion, not a statement. Just a warm, honest place filled with light and open windows and the smell of salt on the air. It would be the kind of home I'd always wanted, but never had. And still, even with peace wrapped around me like a blanket, I couldn't forget the woman I was 3 years ago. The woman with blistered palms, an empty bank account, and a name being erased by her own family. I thought of how many others might be out there like her, like me. People lost, broken, betrayed. People who just needed a second chance. So I created one. Using the profits from my consulting work, I founded a small organization, the Harrison Grant. Named not after my parents, but after my grandfather, the man who saw my worth when no one else did. The foundation gives grants to people, especially young people, who've been victims of financial betrayal, whether by family or fraud or something in between. We help them get legal support, find safe housing, and start again. Clean. Like I did. The first recipient was a 19-year-old woman whose brothers had forged their parents' will to steal her share of the estate. We helped her hire a lawyer, relocate, and start college. Helping her felt better than any corner office ever could. Because my story, Serena's story, was never about revenge. It was about healing. It was never about reclaiming the past. It was about choosing the future. The truth is, you can lose everything. Your name, your job, your family, your dignity, and still build something better from the ashes. You don't have to sit in the ruins. You can rise. You can build. You can become. I became Miles. And then, slowly, I became Serena again. Not the daughter they wanted, but the woman I was meant to be. I chose love, honesty, hard work, integrity. And that legacy, no one will ever take it from me. I still oversee my parents' care, but I do it from a distance. I make sure the trust covers their needs, the best doctors, the most compassionate caregivers, the quiet, dignified space they need in this final stretch of life. But I do not visit. I do not attend holidays. I do not pretend that things are as they were, because they're not. And that's okay. I don't say this from a place of anger anymore. That fire burned itself out a long time ago. I say it from a place of quiet acceptance. I was their daughter. I loved them. I would have given anything, anything, for their belief, for their trust, for their love. But they gave those things to someone else. And in doing so, they broke something in me that will never fully repair. Some fractures become part of the structure. You learn to live with them. You learn to grow around them. I chose not to return to that old identity, the daughter begging to be seen. I chose not to live my life trying to prove my worth to people who refused to recognize it when it mattered most. Instead, I built something new. My life in Port Blossom isn't perfect. Some days are hard. The work is gritty. The sea can be unforgiving. People talk. Small towns always do. But it is real. It is mine. When I walk through the market, people wave. When a new business opens, they ask for my help. When the co-op posts a profit, I feel pride. And every night, when Clara and I sit on our porch, listening to the wind howl through the pines, or watching the moonlight shimmer across the waves, I know something I never knew in the city, never felt in my parents' house. I am home. I am safe. I am loved, not for who people hoped I would be, but for who I truly am. And that is worth more than any inheritance ever could be. If you're reading this, if you've made it to the end of my story, thank you. Truly. I don't share all this for pity or applause. I share it because I know someone out there is standing where I once stood, shunned, shattered, accused, exiled, by the very people who were supposed to protect you. Maybe your betrayal wasn't as public. Maybe your scars aren't visible. Maybe no one else even knows what you've been through. But you know. And if that's you, please hear me when I say this. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are not what they say you are. You can walk away. You can start again. You can choose integrity, even when it costs you everything. And what you build in the aftermath, what you forge with your own hands, your own tears, your own unshakable courage, will be stronger, more beautiful, and more yours than anything they ever gave you. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to say enough. You are allowed to write your own ending. And if no one else tells you this, let me. I am proud of you. Keep going. You have miles left to walk. And I promise you, there is peace on the other side. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you something. Strength, maybe, or clarity. Maybe just a reminder that healing isn't a destination. It's a choice, a daily one. If you've ever had to stand up to your own family, if you've ever been forced to choose between what's easy and what's right, I'd be honored to hear your story too. Please share it in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because the next story might be the one you've been waiting for. Until then, take care of yourself and walk your path without shame.